Hey, ladies, if you are feeling overwhelmed, make sure you watch this video because when I talk to women who have big work, big life, and they want to optimize it for success, they get really, really overwhelmed and it ends up sabotaging most everything. And I want you to think about that overwhelm feeling that you get. When I just say the word overwhelm, I can imagine it like in my chest. It feels like a tingly feeling. It feels like a little bit like almost even in my belly, my pelvis. I get like a little in the back, my back, I get a little like angsty kind of a feeling. So I want you to just see if you recognize this somatic experience or that feeling in your body of what overwhelm feels like. And the reason why we want to get a hack for this, right? We want to make sure we hijack that overwhelm, put it aside and get back onto task is that when we're in that physical state of overwhelm, cortisol runs through our body, adrenaline runs through our body. We actually create those stress hormones that send a signal to our brain to kind of go offline. And our prefrontal cortex, which is like our executive decision making, like our high functioning self, our badass self, right? Our boss babe, um, kind of disappears, right? And so what happens is that our nervous system gets dysregulated from that somatic, that body message, and those chemicals like sort of course through our body. And so what happens as a result is that the part of our brain, the younger part, the unhealed part, the triggered part, the part that is afraid arises, right? It sort of supersedes. And one thing that I really want you to remember and write this down, and why this is really important that you understand how to sort of hijack overwhelm, is that when you are in overwhelm, your adult wants will never supersede your childhood needs. What I mean by that is this is that the brain patterns, the behaviors, the learned responses that are formed in childhood, right, which come from a message of I'm not good enough or I'm not important or whatever yours is, right? That operating system, ultimately, when we go offline, that operating system shows up. And we show up as that part of ourself, that wounded part of ourself. And so when that happens, it doesn't matter that the adult needs that you have to do well, to take care of your family, to get the promotion, to eat healthfully, to make sure you work out, to get your needs met, to speak up and express yourself. All those things you intellectually know because you're super smart. Those needs will never get met if your body gets hijacked by overwhelm. And so, as a result, that younger part of you, that old part of you, that wounded part of you, her needs will supersede the adult needs, and you will get stuck trying to meet the needs of your little self, your unhealed, your part of self that isn't whole and adult. And that can look like over functioning for people, uh, trying to be a perfectionist, procrastination, overworking, right? So, all of those sort of roles and behaviors that we take on that are to compensate from those old messages end up kicking in and superseding our productivity and our ability to optimize everything in our life from a place of our highest self. And so when you think about overwhelm, I want you to start reframing it as not a mental problem, but a body problem, right? Our nervous system gets activated and we don't know how to self soothe. And so we don't know how to bring ourselves back online so we can just problem solve and get shit done. Make sense? Okay. So I want to talk to you about now 5 secrets sort of to hijack overwhelm. And this really is a a different way of thinking about this than you may have heard in the past, because all of the things that you've done in the past probably haven't worked, right? Like getting a new planner, trying to tell yourself you're going to not say yes to take on new projects, time blocking, uh, having one day just to get stuff done, like task or implementation days, all those sorts of things typically don't work because they're dealing with this problem up here in your head and not at the physical or somatic level. So make sure you stay to the end, because I am going to give you one actual strategy, how to tip that actually works with the somatic part of you, the body part of you, that I think you're really going to love and you'll be able to implement right away. Okay, so the first thing is this. I want you to understand that overwhelm is self-imposed. And what I mean by that is that what I just said. Overwhelm is a state of being. It is not intellectual. Overwhelm is a state of being, right? It's how we're experiencing things that are happening in our life, and our body is experiencing them as stressors. And we're coping with those stressors by however it is that we can sort of keep that little part of us safe, right? Or can survive rather than thrive, right? And so when I say overwhelm is self-imposed, I want you to start thinking like, wait, the one thing I'm in charge of and in control of is my body, right? Is my physical self and how I manage my nervous system and my thoughts and my feelings and my behaviors. And so if I understand that I'm empowered to manage this feeling state of overwhelm, then I can ultimately take responsibility for moving through it, moving past it, working around it, or simply not even feeling overwhelmed, or noticing the felt sense of overwhelm in my body and making new choices, right? Not responding to the feeling with the same thoughts. Okay. So that means that I'm going to start thinking about overwhelm as a felt sense of being. It is a physical sensation that my brain turns into a meaning or a thought, and that thought creates behaviors. So when you think about it being self-imposed, what we need to do is we need to first take that feeling, notice what that feeling is, and then start to think about what are the meanings you make of your overwhelm. I can't get this done. It's too much. How am I going to fit this in? Why doesn't anyone help me? Why did I say yes to this? Why bother? I have to do it right. I'm going to be up all night, right? Whatever those thoughts are. So we want to separate those thoughts. We just go, whew, I'm having a feeling, right? And I'm like, okay, it's self-imposed. It is a felt sense. I'm having an experience in my body. I am empowered to shift it. So that's number one, really important. Number two, we talked about understanding why it's happening. Now I want you to personalize that for you. And so one of the things that I really do when I get in that sensation of overwhelm is I connect it to the specific thought that I'm having or the meaning I'm making of the feeling. And usually it's something about the idea that I don't have time, right? Or I don't know how I'm going to get it all done. And the bottom line is, and this is important, is I'm in the future. I leave the present moment of the tasks that I have on my calendar, right? Which I have in a little passion planner. Um, and I leave the present moment and I start futurizing and catastrophizing. The minute I go into the future, I'm not present. All of those feelings that go with the thoughts re-trigger and reactivate the felt sense of overwhelm that I had at the beginning, and it creates a vicious cycle, right? So what we need to do is we need to stay present in the moment. Now, notice this has nothing to do with the planner or the strategy or the time blocking. It's how we're reacting to an experience. And we are interpreting it as a stress And so all those chemicals get released and we go into that vicious cycle. So the second thing to do is to make sure that you are present. So when you notice yourself thinking like, oh my God, I have to go to my Wednesday, or how am I going to do this? Or, oh, I have all these appointments on my calendar, right? Like, no, we're going to be like, okay, what is happening right now? So we're having the feeling, we're understanding why it's happening, and we're understanding it's self-imposed, and we are saying to ourselves, okay, so what's going on in this moment? And then I want you to write this one down. It's okay to feel safe if you are safe. And that comes from one of the coaches that I used to work with, named Sherry Tays, who had a company called Effortless Momentum. And one of the things that she talked about in creating Effortless Momentum is to reassure the parts of you that are those younger parts that are scared, that are trying to protect you, right? That wounded childhood need, to reassure her, I'm in the present. It's okay to feel safe if I am safe. And that really means to locate yourself physically in the presence. And one of my favorite little tips from Kristen Neff, who is a foremost researcher in self-compassion, she has a lot of tips and tricks to sort of presence yourself. And the one that I like the most is to feel my feet in my shoe. So maybe you do that right now just so that you can practice it, right? Like, feel my feet in my shoes, moving my toes around. I'm here, I'm in the present. I'm not worrying that my last chapter for my book is due in 3 days, right? I'm not, that's catastrophizing, that's futurizing, telling myself a bunch of stories. I'm present. So the old way to handle that is to that idea of overwhelm, is to soothe that feeling with either avoidance behaviors, like getting online, doing another task, eating, drinking, getting into drama. If you're single, swiping, maybe. Some sort of distraction that takes you out of that felt sense, in which you don't deal with what's going on, which, guess what? Ultimately, that creates and enhances that vicious cycle that we're trying to get out of, right? So the old way of trying to manage those feelings is not based on being present and actually figuring out, how am I going to do the task? Now, some of you will power through it. And what I want you to think about is, when I take self responsibility, when I get my adult self back online, when I'm present, and I understand that when I turn down or turn off the adrenaline and the cortisol, I can create power from within rather than having to power through or force it. That powering through, that forcing it, that just creates, guess what? More cortisol, more adrenaline, takes more energy, takes more work. It feels really hard. And usually all that energy burns us out. And so we don't complete the tasks. Creates more overwhelm, right? So the new way is, when I'm present, I want to actually slow my body down, right? I want to be present. And I want to actually bring my adult self back online. And a very simple tool and technique that I first heard from Brene Brown is the idea of box breathing. And box breathing is simply going in for 2, hold for 2, exhale for 2, inhale for 2, hold for 2, exhale for 2, right? So I've moved my feet in my shoes, I'm breathing. And what I've done is I've created some spaciousness. And in that sense of spaciousness, there's 2 things that I want you to remember that are truths. And they come from this principle that I like to talk about called radical faith. And radical faith has this belief inside of it that all time is precious and valuable, including the spaciousness, and that everything always gets done because when I'm in spaciousness, I attract and create more spaciousness. Now, I used to have this scurrying, frenetic energy, and I was talking to a client about this. Um, it was like at its worst when I got divorced. I was a mom with young kids. I was going to school, and I remember driving a van. Like I just throw trash in it. Like I was running around. I had this scurry energy, right? That overwhelm. I literally was walking around with it in my body all the time. Maybe some of you can relate to that. If you can, leave a comment. Let me know how that feels for you and when you notice it the most. And so what I learned from doing this process that I'm teaching you is that the minute that I slowed down and created spaciousness and actually moved slower, the more I got done. It took less energy, and time always unfolded so that I had more time. Meaning that if I was trying to get my kids to school on time and in the old way, and I had no spaciousness, and I was like yelling at them upstairs and trying to make lunch and feed the dog and right, do all these different things, right? And comb my hair and have a phone call and text with my best friend, right? I was always late, right? Because then there was something broken with the car, or I forgot the key, or I hit every single stoplight, right? And it was like this energy, right? Overwhelm. And what I learned really quickly, it was kind of magical, is that if I went slower and I didn't multitask and I made the lunch slowly and I went and I said to my kids, like, I'm going to leave in 5 minutes. And then I fed the dog. It seemed like time slowed down and I had more time. And then we'd slowly get in the car. Now, here's the thing, the people around you will notice the shift in energy. And so their behaviors change, right? So the people you work with, the people in your family, your friends, everything slows down, right? And then I would get in the car and I'd be like, oh my God, there's the keys, right? They're right there. And I would hit every green light. And then I would be in the car and I'd get a notice from the school that, we're starting 10 minutes late today because there was a blah, 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 right? Like time would unfold for me. So in that spaciousness, we have radical faith that time is unfolding for me, right? And that all time is precious and valuable, meaning that I want to be present for every moment of it, for making the sandwich, for talking to my kids, for feeding the dog, for getting in the car, right? Moments aren't made to rush through to get to the next moment. In that space of creation, we have this spaciousness. And guess what? Our body loves it, right? Because we've brought our highest self back online. We don't forget things. We don't lose things. We don't do tasks quickly and forget important details. We find time on our calendar. Things cancel, things open up, things come easier. They take less time than we thought because we are creating, right? We are creating flow energy. We are creating ease. We are creating grace. We are no longer overwhelmed. When our frontal cortex, our prefrontal cortex, when that adult executive function comes back online, we're more creative. We have access to our genius, to our intuition. We are able to do more with effortless power rather than trying to cram it all in from a place of overwhelm and feeling like we have to force our way through to get shit done. So now, one of my favorite little techniques, I'm back online. I've got spaciousness. I need to write. I have my pages due. I've slowed everything down. I believe all time is precious and valuable. And then I simply try this little task. manager, and it's called the Pomodoro method. And I learned this method when I was involved in groups with a bunch of academics, people who worked in academics. And they told me about this little trick. And I was like, this is amazing. And you can even go online for free. You can just search in Google Pomodoro method, and it will give you a little timer. And you set, some of them are for 20 minutes and some of them are for 25 minutes. Now, the reason why this like is a hack, or it tricks your brain, or it hijacks your overwhelm, is that you start to think, okay, all I have to do is do this task for 20 or 25 minutes, right? I'm just making a commitment to 20 or 25 minutes. I just am going to get started, right? And I believe that all time is precious and valuable, and the right thing will happen at the right time. And I have radical faith. I'm going to get it done. I believe in myself, right? And so you just go and you set the timer for 25 minutes or 20 minutes, whichever one yours is. And I do recommend doing it with an app or online rather than just setting it on your phone for a timer, because it's just kind of fun. All the different online Pomodoro techniques, they just have sounds or little images. It just makes it feel more fun for me. And then you're just going to sit down and you're going to do the task. Now, here's what happens. Most of the time, I find, and when my clients do this, once you get going, because you don't have all that cortisol and adrenaline, you're not in force energy and you're in flow, you actually can complete the task or make really good headway in it. You get really engaged in the task. Now, if it's a task that you don't enjoy doing, it's a task that isn't fun, or it's a task that feels really hard, the good news is you only have to do it for 20 or 25 minutes. So what I recommend is, and then this is the strategy, is put in your calendar in the time of day where you feel the most energetic and engaged. For me, that's early in the morning. Um, every day in your calendar, time block out a Pomodoro and start with the task that you are most overwhelmed by, that feels like the biggest or the hardest, and do an experiment and see what you learn about yourself. If you can follow through on these steps and see if you can make really good progress on your strategies, right? On your tactics, on your things that you need to implement. The strategies and tactics and planners and tools and implementation days and all those things are more likely to work when you have learned these 5 secrets and you are actually implementing from a place of your adult self, and that you are turning down the dial on overwhelm and turning up the dial on presence, and really showing up for your tasks from a place of your most authentic, highest self, which we call your essence. So, if you would like more help with how to get to get out of overwhelm so that you can have your big life and big work and optimize for success, please send me a message on either Facebook Messenger or direct message me on Instagram, and we can talk about how I can help you create your ideal life without the grind. Mwah. See you soon.